distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends.
Okay, hold up, family. My name is Brother Ray. We'd like to welcome everyone to the BK History Club. We meet here every other Wednesday in honor of Amos Wilson, El-Haj Malik Shabazz, the late great attorney at war, Alternates Maddox, and his birthday just passed. May he rest in peace. Bad man in the courtroom. Louis Ray Rivera, Minister Khalid, Brother Hassan, Gil Noble, Colette Colvin, Renoko Rashidi, and all the individuals, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Ivan Van Sertima, what's the brother from 125th Street?
Michelle.
Is that the tapes?
Amos?
No. Brother Sekou. All the individuals. We never want to, they try their best to eliminate them in the history. And that's what they're trying to do. So for the people that came out in this heat to enjoy the BK History Club and get some educational lectures, give yourself a great big hand. It's a lot of people leaving us, and we have to try to keep this going. Miss Leola Maddox, who drove a relatively old and new car, and she would come to the UAM every Wednesday, drove that car all the way from Teaneck, because she believed in bringing people together. She believed in that live talking, the camaraderie. You could talk to the speaker. You could talk with him. You could listen to him, ask him questions. But with technology, you can also have people that don't live in New York to log on to an educational lecture. You could have somebody live in Detroit, California, Cleveland, Africa, all over the world with technology. So it is moving with the speed of light. But we want to thank the people that come down, and because they want to get some information. And I always want to try to get speakers and say hello to people and see how they're doing, because I've just been going, I truly believe that they're really getting rid of us. I done went to, that had to be about 10 to 12 funerals. And it was supposed to be going to one, not tomorrow, the day after. So we meet and honor these people. Because with all the stuff going on, I could just think of Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Mackey, giving a critical analysis of Palestine and all the stuff going on, and presidents and all that. It would be can you imagine Alambe Braff giving the historical context of Burkina Faso?
Oh my goodness.
And he knew the heads of state. When you go to Africa, you have to go with somebody that's been there. Dr. Ben's been there so many times. So I'm going to bring this camera over to the Amos collection. African World Info Systems. The Amos collection. And we never want to forget Amos and Sababu and his collection, Blueprint for Black Power, Black on Black Violence, the psychodynamics of black self-annihilation in service of white domination. And whether we know it or not, we are still dominated by Europeans. They fund both sides. The psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward a reclamation of the African mind. African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order. The falsification of African consciousness. Louis Ray Rivera's classic Jazz in Jail. and Amos's classic, Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children. So we have those books here at the Mackey's group, and they are readily available. They are ready for purchase. And you can get them. They're not banned in no books. So happy birthday to Alton. They're not banned in no books. So I have a bunch of books for educational purposes only. You could buy them on Amazon. You could go down to Strand's bookstore. You could get them wherever they have them. And you could read them and take your time reading them and study them. So the first book I'm going to come out with is Without Sanctuary. In this book, everybody's talking about reparations, and they're trying to do it they want the black vote. So they steady running this reparations. It's a George Soros creation. And reparations is all over the place. The European can't even take care of his own people. They strung out, they smoking crack, they smoking weed, they all over the place. He can't even take care of them. So every time they have another study, they never bring this book up. They never bring it up. And you not only have the European slave trade, you have the Arab slave trade. Arab slave trade and the European slave trade. So if you're talking about reparations, you better do it globally. Africans or Americans, black identity and political activism in New York City, 1784 to 1861. And we're going to get Trust to do another critical analysis on that. His lecture today is on W.E.B. Debois and the Negro. And we got Black Reconstruction in America, 1860 to 1880. This is a good read. Excellent book. Also in honor of Bill Mackey. Down Home, Return to the Georgia Backwoods. In 1969, after 20 years living in New York, engineer, photographer, educational William Henry Mackey returned to the rural Georgia backwoods where he had been raised. During his 20 years since he left, the South had undergone drastic change from the civil rights era to the technology advances in farming techniques, yet at the same time it remained the same simple place where he had grown up. So I'm going to try my best to get Mackey's book published again, get some copies so I can have it. In honor of Dr. Ben, black man in the Nile and his family. Dr. Ben goes into Ethiopia, the building of the pyramids, the Hyksos, the languages of that vast continent. Dr. Ben went in and got older, so we never want to forget Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark. And if you get that book, Black Man in the Nile, you'll be able to get into a lot of stuff. This gentleman, Reginald Lewis, created a billion-dollar business empire, and he's from out of Baltimore. Beatrice Foods. And he got taken out in a plane crash, I believe. But they tell you so much bad about Baltimore with the drug game and all that, but they never tell you the good part. They never tell you how a man, and his book is, why should the white guys have all the fun? They do hostile takeovers all the time. So a hostile takeover is when you got a company and the other guy is looking at your company and you don't want to sell your company, and they will take it from you.
Yeah.
They do it on Wall Street every day.
Disney, ABC.
Booker T. Washington in Africa, the making of a Pan-African. Tyreen Wright. Queen Nzinga of Angola, African warrior queen. And I wish the sisters would read about Queen Nzinga and Winnie Mandela and them fierce warriors. And every time I turn around on social media, I see some brother beating up his sister or beating up a wife or doing some kind of nonsense. You read about Queen Nzinga and see how she was a fierce warrior in negotiating with the Portuguese. You'll wake up and you won't let the stuff happen to you that's happening. Richard Pryor. You want to know about somebody, read Richard Pryor's book, man. This man done went through a lot of stuff. With pimps and hoes and women of the night and, oh man, read Richard Pryor's book. Slavery by Another Name, the re-enslavement of black Americans from the Civil War to World War II. Excellent book. You could get these books anywhere. The Destruction of Black Civilization, Chancellor Williams Classic. And he tells you all the mistakes that we made in that vast land. The African continent is so huge. And there was a whole lot of problems. Everything was not correct. He talks about the Arab slave trade. He talks about the mistakes they made, the fierce wars. You would think that we never had no wars, that we wasn't fighting, that they just came in. He speaks about Africa being old and tired and how other people just slid right in. And if you want another critical analysis of Chancellor Williams and his great work, the African Echoes family, our speaker tonight, is doing a critical analysis of this book. And it's a documentary, if you can find it. Gil Noble, he talks about how they dumped the drugs in the black community from the 50s going on up. And it destroyed us. It's still destroying us as a people. And he said they had to have a person. He had to be well known in the community. He had to have a criminal record. He had to know everybody. And they gave him the stuff and they told him to come into the black communities throughout the United States, from Compton to Bed-Stuy to East New York, and say, this is the new thing out. And it destroyed not only my family, it destroyed a whole bunch of other people's families. Grandmothers didn't know what to do with their sons and daughters. Devastated. How they created the black drug dealer. How organized crime sat on the side, on the east side of Manhattan, controlled all the drugs. And they got a TV series on about this guy called Bumpy Johnson. And when you look at the TV series, it's very disgusting in my opinion, because I read the book written by his wife. But you would think all he did was sell drugs. In this TV documentary, you would think all he did was sell drugs.
He was a philanthropist.
They never tell you the good things that he did. They never tell you that. They just have him fighting the Italians and this and that. It's one of the disgusting
misrepresentations.
Series. And everybody watching. I went to New Orleans. I caught a kidney stone in New Orleans. I tell you, I went to a family reunion in New Orleans, and I said I'm gonna eat me some, not that Popeye's fish, that real stuff, and I was gonna eat me some alligator and some chicken, and I went down there and the kidney stone moved. And they had to rush me to the hospital, but the next day I felt a little better after going through all that pain. So I went to aside the French Quarters and everything being basically a smorgasbord of drinking and running around, and they got museums down there. And I went to the New Orleans Museum. And I picked up captives, Louisiana and making of mass incarceration. And they have that prison down there, Angola, which is on plantation. They grow their own food. And the guy was saying they had all the jazz musicians and the pitchers, and I was talking to one of the guys, and he said, listen, if you get in trouble down there, you will never come out of Angola. And they just passed a law. You will spend your whole life down there. You will never get out. And then I picked up this book, Portrait of the 1961 Mississippi Freedom Riders. The black women The black men that paved the way. See, they never talk about that when they bring up stuff now that's happening. So I picked up these new books, and when you go down there, they sell liquor in CVS store. They sell liquor in the grocery store. The places, liquor, drinking, liquor. But they have museums down there. And they have a whole bunch of educational places in New Orleans to learn about slavery, to learn what was going on. So when you go down there, it ain't only about drinking and having a good time. Go to the educational things they have down there in New Orleans. So, unofficial White House Guide to Rights and Privilege of Transgender. They came up, somebody made a statement, and I wind up finding this, and this is an unofficial White House guide. Compelled by Richard Sanders, publicly accessible document from the President Obama administration. So everybody was trying to say something, but I went and found the book on it. And that's why I say they always have books. Barack Obama and Larry Sinclair, Cocaine, Sex, Lies. There's another book I found out on this gentleman. And this is the main one, Wayne Mansfield, The Manufacturing of a President, the CIA insertion of Barack Hussein Obama into the White House. And it's a whole bunch of information in this book. Professor Mackey would always say, when you want to learn about somebody, buy a book. The books is out. Whitney Webb, One-Two Punch, and she wrote a book, One Nation Organized Under Blackmail. The so-did union between intelligence, organized crime that gave rise to Epstein. Now, you can say whatever you want that's going on, but they got a lot of books out on that, and I tell you something right now, regular people can't go to that club. Only the big boys go to that club. Regular people cannot go. If you ever want to see how Europeans live, you get this book on dirt. And I remember Mackey said the umbrella was created not to stop rain. The sewer system and the diseases and germs in Europe was so bad, they was throwing the waste out of the window. So they created something that stopped the waste from hitting you in the head because they had no sewer system. And I believe when the Moors came in, they kind of hooked them up and showed them how to do things.
Take a bath.
An empire of their own. How the Jews invented Hollywood. From Harry Cohen to Jack and Harry Warner, how they created things. Black exploitation movies, events that never happened. They had people crossing rivers, and at that time it was no record keeping. So how did they do that? Birth of a Nation destroyed the image of black folks. King Kong. Anybody that's getting in the music industry and the movie should read this book and see how they set this thing up. And they was in the red, and the black exploitation movies brought them out of the red, the same way they doing now. So they created events that didn't even happen. And the biggest one was the 10 Commandments. It's in the book. And they did not like Neil Gerbler for writing this book. Dope Incorporated. Everywhere you go, they got medical marijuana, weed spots all over the place. And Lyndon LaRouche did a good job. They got us strung out, they got the Chinese strung out, and now they doing us in. And George Soros is behind it. That's it. That guy is something else. But Dope Incorporated, and they have the pictures. This is a picture of a Chinese opium smoker in the 19th century. So when you talk about black folks in crack pipes, crack houses and shooting galleries, and people want to talk about black folks and what happened to us during drugs, if you don't know the history, you won't know what to say. This is a picture of the Chinese in the opium den. Everybody involved. The international Jew, Henry Ford, and the people in Detroit said in Dearborn, Michigan, Henry Ford said he would, over his body, there'd be some blacks in Dearborn.
What? Say what? Repeat.
Henry Ford said that over his body, there'd never any be some blacks in Dearborn, Michigan.
What did that mean?
That we couldn't live there?
You couldn't live there.
Dearborn.
Oh, his dead body.
I found this book, Dark Money, Cabal, Manipulation in the Federal Government, and I looked on the back, and guess whose name I see? King George Soros.
What's the name of the book?
Why did the Biden White House celebrate Transgender Day, a Transgender Day visibility on Easter Sunday? Why is the bureaucratic prioritizing electric vehicles, less reliable forms of energy?
So they can keep the
So,
oil industry.
you know, this book gets into a little something. You take what you need, what you don't need, you leave it. Ayo Kamati, Jews are the problem. Jews are the problem 1 and the psychology of the Jew number 2. We want to thank Ayo Kamati on this 1-2 punch. And this is another book I found. This is Beatram Wallace Core, Jews and Negro Slavery in the Old South, 1789 to 1865. And the cover is pretty good. So books is all over the place. The problem is, are you going to get them and read them? And at least have them. The Trumps. Donald Trump, the deal maker. Donald's German immigrant grandfather, Frederick, came to America with a suitcase in his hand and a dream, stinking and dirty. And he tells you the story of 3 generations. And I don't care what you say about him, I don't care what you say about anybody. Professor Mackey said if you want to learn about Thomas Jefferson and Sally Heming and all what happened during slavery with these robber barons, you read the books on them. That's all. Spiro Agnew, go quietly or else. So if you think somebody running this thing, you think somebody running something, you think Donald J. Trump, Biden, and all of them is running something, they ain't running the damn thing. This is the book, Go Quietly or Else. Children at work. Slave labor. These are children. Children at work. In the factories. Making brooms. Shining shoes. But they want to put that on us. In the factories. Europeans. Sewing shirts. The Triangle Shirt Factory was down in the Lower East Side and they burnt it down. Huh? Huh? So one thing you got to remember is, if you don't know how to defend yourself, people could tell you anything. Why did they have this? Why do you not hear about this? Huh? Why you don't hear about it? Why you don't know about this? Another book I just found, The Irish. And they war with the British. Fighting, and they got a book, The Irish, and how they got what they wanted. And when they came to America, they took over city services, transportation, police. They fought wars. So these books, you'll understand historical context. But if you don't get the books and people say something about you, You don't know how to come back. You don't know how to defend yourself, and you sit there and look goofy. Because you got to know something. George Soros, staying ahead of the curve. The Soros agenda. George Soros controls the whole Democratic Party. Warren Buffett and all these guys, Charles Schwab ain't got nothing on King George but investor. And the man behind the curtain, the secret network of George Soros. And he's just the one that they let you know about. They got people you don't even know about. The cancer industry, crimes, conspiracy, and the death of my mother. Neither safe nor effective. The evidence against the CO vaccine. Invasion of the prostate snatchers. And there's a lot of things going on with the prostate, so you got to start reading the book on them. They do it unnecessary. This book says invasion of the prostate snatchers, and they buy 2 doctors. No more unnecessary biopsies. Radical treatment or loss of sexual potency. And they got another one by the guy who created the PSA test. And it'll tell you everything about it. So I'm reading it, and men gotta read it. Dr. Scott Whitaker, Medicine. How the U.S. creates S-hole countries. Cynthia McKinney. So when they talk about S-hole countries, you gotta understand the U.S. creates S-hole countries.
Right.
You have a situation now where a lot of stuff is going on in Haiti. But they never tell you about the Biggio family and the other Jewish families that control Haiti. Okay, you gotta cut that down. The American medical killing machine. The Pfizer papers, and it tells you what happens to the blood. It tells you what happens to your blood after you put that in you. Another friend of mine, it didn't wake up in his sleep. Didn't wake up. It tells you what happened after taking. And Pfizer did not want to put this book out. I don't know how Moderna got around it. I'm glad I got this one. Moderna stopped it. That's how big Pharma is. They stopped it. The vaccine timeline, and it goes into vaccines from the turn of the century. And this blockbuster by Edward Dow, causes unknown. Young people, soccer players in the prime. A soccer player runs up and down the street, runs up the court, kicking the ball. His heart is pumping fast. And all of a sudden they drop dead. All of a sudden.
It's the vaccine.
No, you got to read it in the books. Because this is something that they don't even want to deal with on what happened to millions of people. Nobody wants to deal with it, and they're dealing with it now. So this guy, Edward Dow, was a financial titan with King BlackRock, Larry Fink. They control everybody's pension. They control all of us. And he was managing the $12 billion growth fund. He built a reputation for keen ability to pick stocks. And he found himself withdrawn from Wall Street to study an entirely new kind of trend. The tragic epidemic of sudden death among young, healthy individuals.
Yeah, why is that?
So this book and Rand Paul deception, and they taken Fauci and they putting them through the hot coals. And it's being exposed. He's exposing them. So we got Marcus Garvey, Raymond Duncan, Michael Duncan and Raymond Dugal and the Marcus Garvey movement trying their best to reprogram our mind. They got a store called The Rock, 13205 Merritt Boulevard. They just had their parade in Queens. And when you go out there, you don't have to worry about getting disrespected. You don't have to worry about somebody following you around the place. It's a mini Jetros. The prices is excellent. You don't have to worry about somebody following you, accusing you, and this and that, because you're spending your money with your own people. And they're trying their best, one at a time.
So I make sure I go out there once a month and spend some money. Thorough Black Talk, hottest show in New York. Ted, Keisha Ashe, Brother Blacksmith, Sister Mama, the Freedmen's Bureau, they talking about reparations and goings on with this reparation movement. That comes on tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Our Philadelphia connection with Sister Empress Chi, Brother Lumumba, El Pollinator, Blog Talk Radio. That Saturday program, 11 o'clock, is a blockbuster, and they have podcasters all over coming from Philly with Momia, Pam Africa, Io Kamati and Sankofa Revolutionary Radio out of Birmingham, Alabama. This is a blockbuster program, comes on Monday from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock. You got Brother Jamal, you can call in from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock. You got Dr. Haru with his health problems and all the questions, what he's doing. And then 10 to 11, you got Io Kamati. He's in Burkina Faso right now, and he's giving you an update and about the slavery situation in Kenya. Our friend Darren Muhammad, State of the City out of Baltimore. That comes on sometime Wednesday, Thursday, but the Saturday program, State of the City, Darren Muhammad, Baltimore on Facebook and Instagram. That's a blockbuster program. Every Tuesday, Your Immunity Project with Dr. Aline and the African Echoes family out of Newark, New Jersey. Every Friday at 8 o'clock, we have Brother Trust Graham, Brother True and the gang out of Newark. They have a study group, and they're doing the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward the reclamation of the African mind. But they give you a 1-2 punch. On Saturday, they come together with the Know Thyself study group out of Asbury Park. Brother True and Trust is also the mediator, so you got a double header. And when you think you know something about study, you just don't know when you listen to Trust, our keynote speaker. The Simotap organization with James McIntosh, Minefield, 10 o'clock on Tuesdays, 99.5. And they had a tribute with Dr. Clark, and they also have an event coming up. So these are just programs that come on and you can follow, get the information, and they all for educational series, educational information to the public. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we're going to bring our keynote speaker on, always a good friend of the BK History Club. And I'm going to try my best to bring him on as much as possible so you can get the information on this brother. And this is part 2 of W.E.B. Debois and the Negro. Ladies and gentlemen, give a great big hand to Brother Trust Graham. Okay, before I get started.
Okay, first before we get started, I want to, in true African tradition, I want to ask the person that is oldest in the room for the opportunity to speak.
I'm 82. Is anybody older than me?
Yeah. I'm 82.
Well, let us look at this lady now. Yeah,
Okay, so all three of y'all at the same time.
That's right.
Give Trust the permission to speak.
I have my permission
Thank
to
you.
speak.
I appreciate it. In true tradition in Africa, it was always, giving respect, reverence, and honor to the eldest individuals in the room, because those are the individuals whose shoulders we stand on. So it's always important to acknowledge their presence and acknowledge their insight and wisdom. So I thank you again for giving me this opportunity. I want to thank Brother Ray and the William Mackey's History Club for giving me this opportunity again to be with you. As you do know, I was here over the 4th of July weekend. And we were going to talk about this subject matter then, but was preempted by a reading of the What to the Slave is the 4th of July by Frederick Douglass, which was more appropriate for the time and the 250-year anniversary of this country. And a lot of times one of the key factors of being able to understand our contribution to this history is knowing what happened. And most of us are not clear on what happened. And not only that, there's a lot of information now that has been circulated throughout this new technology that we have that a lot of time gets it wrong. That means they circulate information that is incorrect and wrong. And a lot of us take it because it sounds good and it has some sense of merit to it, but in reality, it's just completely wrong. And the reason that is because we're looking at history through romanticism. History is not about romantic. Does that play a part at particular points in our history? Yes. But that's not how we actually go out and seek and uncover these particular events in order to understand and to have a clearer perception of what actually took place and what role we played in it and what benefits, what lessons we're going to learn from it. So again, that was a few weeks ago. As you do know, the topic title for this evening is W.E.B. Debois, the Negro in 1915. That particular title is not a title, but it also represents a book that W.E.B. Du Bois, as you can see, I'll hold it up here. This is the book for those that never seen it before. And this book was written in 1915 by W.E.B. Du Bois. And one of the reasons that I chose this particular book in regard to its discussion is because of how visionary and far-sighted it was. In other words, how much Du Bois knew about black people and history and information at a remote time that a lot of us, at least for myself, I didn't find out about some of this stuff until the late 1970s, early 80s, and into the 90s. And when we talk about Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark and a lot of those individuals, remember, they stand on this man's shoulders. And that means that he lays the foundations for a lot of the work that they eventually would do. But some of the things that Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark talked about in the 80s, he was talking about as early as 1900. That's amazing, with no technology, and second of all, having access to, information and access to institutions that normally we wouldn't have access to. And what it also showed me was that we knew about certain things when a lot of us didn't know. In other words, there were information that was available to us, but we was not available to it. And what proves that is W.E.B. Du Bois's, quest for being able to, set right in place, who the black man really was and what his contribution was. So what I decided to do was to do what I do normally in my study group, and that is to give you an expose on some of the skills and techniques that I use in order to, retrieve information, but most of all, how to read a book. And most of us, when it comes down to consuming information, we just think it's about regurgitating words off a page, which is not the case. And second is that these are what I call, grassroots guerrilla techniques that every person would need in their repertoire in order to be more efficient about understanding information and what becomes, important. One of the reasons that I chose again this particular book is because one, it's a primary source. That means it comes from the horse's mouth. So I'm not going to be reading to you from somebody else's point of view about W.E.B. It's going to be him reading himself. So that way, all source history in regard to research and study is based on primary sources. That means the people who was there when the events were taking place. Now, even though they was there, that don't mean they truly understood what was taking place. But when the science of history is brought into play, then they have a better way of being able to address the material in a more conclusive context. So that's one of the particulars. And then there's no better a person than W.E.B. Du Bois, because he is what we would call a scholar's scholar. That means he understands not only the mechanics of the discipline, he understands the very nature of its dissemination and circulation and what that means to us as a people. So that becomes very important too. So again, he was that kind of individual that wore many hats. We look at him as a scholar, but he also was an activist. He also was a sociologist. He also was a political individual. I mean, in just so many different ways. So one of the things that I thought would be interesting is, again, sharing with you some of these particular techniques that we use in order to broaden our understanding about information. So I'll take you through some of those particulars. One is the name of the book. The name of the book is called The Negro. It's not called The Black Man. It's not called The African American. It's called The Negro. And it's called that for a reason, because the time in which this book was written, that was the popular name, or not even popular, it was the progressive name for black people at that particular time. And as you know, most of the names that black people eventually acquire are names that are given to us, that we didn't come up with them. So whether you was called nigger, whether you was called Negro, whether you was called colored, whether you was, all of these names were names that were given to you. And some of them you adopted, and some of them you kicked to the curb. But the reality is that it wasn't indigenously developed or generated, these particular terms. So again, the name of this book is The Negro by W.E.B. Du Bois. The original publication was in 1915, but this particular publishing date was 2007. So that means that everybody here, this book is readily available. You can go to whatever your local black bookstore, if you have one here. You know, people that do know me from a variety of places, as well as scholarship, but also in the black book business. I was in the black book business for about 40, 50 years. I know ins and outs of the functions and the mechanics of the business, much less, you know, the context of the material that circulated through that particular industry. And where it is, you know, today is a little different. I've been out of the mix for maybe about 10 or 15 years, but I'm still familiar with all of the details of what's going on in the industry. So that's far as the black book business. This book was written in 1915. This particular publication was published by Casimo Press, or Casimo Classics. But you can find it by Dover Press, you can find it by a few particulars. The most important thing is when you do seek out this particular text, that you look at for a complete version, because sometimes they have you know, abridged versions, and you know, some guys only put out certain chapters and stuff like that. But in this case, you want to be able to make sure that you get a good, complete version of the subject matter. And again, we're talking about the Negro. Second is that, say that again?
Will it say so in the book?
Will what you say so?
Edition.
Oh yes,
Okay.
if it's a good book. I mean, remember, I want to say this too, being in the book business, you know, a lot of people have this mentality of what they think about books and information, but the book business, and at least not, and also when I'm talking about mainstream books as well as the black book business, is like the drug business. You know, it's just corrupt in a lot of ways. The object is that most of us don't have a clue and don't even have any idea that these things goes on behind the scenes. People stealing each other's books and publishing rights, printing people's material when it's not theirs. I mean, all kinds of things that go on. And one of the things is understanding that books is a business. It's about making money. You know, like y'all don't understand, church is also about making money. It's not about spirituality, and I don't even know why we think about religion as a spiritual experience. I understand what your perception is, but what the reality and what you see before you is something completely different. So obviously that shouldn't be your source if you want to find, you know, a spiritual experience. But in this case, as far as the book business is concerned, knowing and understanding a publishing house gives you an idea on the direction that this text is going. Because certain publishers only publish certain kind of material.
Yes.
So if you go to certain publishers, you're going to find certain material only dealing in this. They got publishers that only deal in black books. They got publishers that only deal in white books. And when I say white, I mean white supremacy books. They got mainstream material, books that only deal with, publishing houses that only deal with gay material. That means they don't deal with nobody else's but gay stories, infant history, all that kind of stuff. And the issue of genres of study, whether you study in, you know, self-help or, you know, fiction or non-fiction or whatever, religion, whatever. The issue is based on most publishing houses have a bone to pick in which particular direction they go. Only when you get to the bigger boys, the individuals who actually control the industry, they literally have their hands in a little bit about everything. That means when you're talking about the Simon Schusters and the Random Houses and the Penguins of the world, these are the institutions that really control the understanding. And those are subsidiaries of Viacom and all of these big, you know, conglomerates that actually own the media corporations. And I'm talking about, you know, the media corporations that you see on TV and then the internet and so forth and so on. They control information. And, you know, I also want to say before we get started, and that is that history is a subjective discipline. It's not no absolute history. There's no such a thing. And for us to even think like that shows we are limited in our understanding about what history really is about. History is always about the person who's telling it. That's usually how the case goes, and that's the way it always been. And most of us go with that storyline because that's what we know. I'll prove it to you. How many of y'all ever at any time seen a beautiful sunrise? You raise everybody I'm letting the audience know that everybody here raised their hand. Now science says there's no such a thing because the sun can't rise. It don't go nowhere.
Right.
The sun don't set.
But that's how it's called, sunrise.
Yeah, but the issue is, think of what you just said. It's what it's called. And the reason it's called that because the people that was watching it didn't really understand what was taking place when they seen it. But they gave it a particular, you know, as we would say, perspective based on what they interpreted it to be. Now, this is quite a number of years later, and science says something else. But that's not, they decided to change it, did they? No, because they still say, go to the weather today, and they're going to say the sun rises at such and such time and the sun sets. And any astrophysicist would tell you there's no such a thing. But again, this is how some things work in history, much less in society, as well as in how we transmit and circulate information. So that's what this whole, process is that we're going to engage into this evening. I'm going to read some material from this book to give you some insight where Debois was coming from. Obviously, I'm not going to read the whole book, but I'm going to give you some material so that you can see how visionary, how far ahead he was in his thinking before anybody else came on the scene. When you think of Debois, remember, there's only a few other historians that come before him that writes real history. I mean, real history. The oldest person that I know in Western rural African American historian is George Washington Williams. If you don't know him, write that name down, and believe me, he is recognized as the historian's father of history. George Washington Williams.
How old is he?
Excuse me?
How old is he? How old was he?
I'm not going to answer that because that's your job. The object is we have to take into consideration that our history, if it's going to be told by us, we got to do the legwork.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to do the legwork, how you going to argue with somebody about whether something is truth or not if you don't know either or? You can't argue with a person about their position if you don't know their position. That don't make sense. That's why the first thing you learn from Sun Tzu in the Art of War is knowing your enemy. Knowing the guy you're getting ready to fight. You don't just jump up one day and say, I'm a fighter. Like our brother a couple of days ago was talking about, Africa needs to arm itself. I just started laughing. He thought it was like, why would I be laughing? And my thing is that maybe you might want to think about making weapons before you think about arming yourself. That would help. Because obviously if you're fighting the enemy, that in order for you to fight him, you got to buy weapons from him. Think about that. think about that. So think about the same situation I just outlined to you about history. That you want the guy to teach you the truth about history, and he the one that put you in the position and the condition that you find yourself, and you want reparations from that same joker. Think about that.
Ain't gonna happen.
I'm not saying that whether it's justified or not. I'm just saying is that it seems kind of, ludicrous to me that you would ask a person that raped and robbed your family and killed your father and mother, put all of your family in jail, and then you want that person to give you payback and teach your kids the truth.
Yeah.
It's funny. But so I'm gonna open up by, again, going through some of these particular procedures. First is, again, I told you the name of the book, I told you the author of the book, I told you the publisher of the book, I told you the publishing date. I also will tell you that there are 146 pages in this book, 146 pages. One of the things that it doesn't have that I'm quite determined about, it doesn't have an indexation and it doesn't have a glossary. Now again, a lot of that could be how he wrote the material, because at the early days sometimes Debois would write articles, and then he would compile the articles and it would become a book, versus at certain times he would deal with, like the first book he ever wrote, Suppression of the African Slave Trade, was his dissertation, or his thesis for his degree. But the other thing too is that one of the things that the bibliography and the indexation does is it provides for you insight in regard to his thinking and also what source material he used and drew from in order to put this material together. That's very important. You want to know where the material came from. You want to have an idea on what that material has to offer. So, How the book opens up, it opens up first with, I'm going to read to you what is called a blurb. A blurb is usually what you see on the back of the book. And these blurbs are written by individuals who they asked their comment after they read the book, what they thought about the book. And usually they would get scholars or people that are colleagues in the discipline that would come out and they would read the material and tell whatever glowing so-and-sos. And then other sometimes would tell you the shortcomings of it, depending on, who the individual was. As a matter of fact, that book, Destruction of Black Civilization, one of the key factors was that on the back of that book, in the early days, there was a blurb written by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and Muhammad Speaks, and he wasn't too happy about Chancellor Williams talking about Islam the way that he did, so he wrote not a too good response. But a good book will have that. Most books won't. Let me see. It says here, Muhammad Speaks, it says, for a well-documented chapter of Egyptian civilization, Chancellor Williams moves on through material that deals with the impact of Judaism and Christianity on African migrations. His claims, listen to this, his claims that Islam helped slavery of black Africa is untrue. This is what Muhammad is saying, because he used white texts rather than accounts of non-white academia and the truth. Now, I know that's not true, but again, they take that because they're Muslims. That you're going to try to defend, what you feel is in your best interest. And Chancellor's position about Islam is as balanced as his information about slavery. He doesn't go around and say that Africans wasn't involved in slavery. That's not Chancellor. He gonna tell you the involvement and who was involved and all of the characters and how it unfolded. Now, the object, are we gonna be as forthcoming in embracing that and understanding what that has to offer, to really understand the material? Most of us don't. We just take it for granted, whatever they say, and we just regurgitate whatever they say. And that's not what history is about. Just because Dr. Ben said it, or Dr. Clark said it, or W.E.B. Debois said it, don't make it true. Not if you didn't go and research the material and follow up to validate that the material or the claim that he has made is true. That's what real research is about. But a lot of us don't realize that, because real truth is time consuming. That means you have to really take time to go out and search and really find out the facts and evidence in order to validate your claim. But most of us are not going to do that. It's easier to go to the internet and hear what Joe Blow said, take that and run with it. And not even determine determine whether it's true or not. Just because it sounds good to you. And many of y'all know I talk about this black first president nonsense so much, because most of us have this idea that just cause, we was here or it was black, or we think it was black, that make it better. No, black people did some effed up stuff in the world.
That's right.
I mean, we've been here longer than anybody else. That's a fact. But the reality to assume that, evil came in the world when a white boy came here, that's just ludicrous. Come on, stop that. I mean, y'all can't even, entertain that. And how the fight you had with your own family members. Come on, stop it. So that's some of the basics. But let me read the blurb. It says, this is the classic history of the African peoples in Africa and the New World. Now, mind you, the name of the book is The Negro. It's not the African, it's not the black man, it's the Negro. Now, mind you, what it's actually saying is that how he equated the relationship between this concept we define as a Negro and an African. That's what he's saying. He says that he said that in the New World, a repudiation of the absurd belief widely held in the post-Civil War period. What is he talking about? The widely held position in the post-Civil War period. Anybody know what happened in the post-Civil War that changed history? That changed all of American history?
Reconstruction.
No, not Reconstruction.
The abandonment.
I said history. I didn't say nothing about the events.
Oh.
Write this down. If you don't know, write it down. There's a concept called the lost cause. You want to know what this is about? The lost cause. The lost cause was a concept that was developed by the Daughters of the Confederacy. And it was based on telling the history of the Civil War and what actually happened. But they wasn't convinced as historians or educators or anything. Their position was telling their story so that they can better prevent the story and the loss from being so penetrating. And what I mean by that is that how they felt about what happened to them after the Civil War. In other words, they wanted to let you know they didn't lose. Let me ask you all a question. The United States government fought the Vietnam War. Y'all heard about that, right? Anybody ever seen a statue in America for Ho Chi Minh?
No.
Anybody see a statue in America for any individual from Vietnam?
No.
You see a statue in America for any individual in World War II? Any statue? Any? What statue that you see for Tojo, Hitler, anyone? You see a statue in America for them? No, you don't even see a statue for any American that was an ally. So you don't see no statue of Churchill in America. Anybody seen a statue of Churchill? No. And that was our ally. And the jokers that we called in the lost cause was traitors. I mean, 100% out and out traitors. They tried to overthrow the government. Usually the case for a traitor is what? Death.
Yeah.
That was the going. But what did we give them? Statues. We named schools after them, streets after them.
Bridges.
Think about that. Military bases. So again, we're talking about rewriting history. Writing for a popular audience in 1915, Du Bois, one of America's greatest writers, lays out in Essay to Read, non-academic prose, the striking and illustrious story of the complex history and varied culture of Africa, from the art and industry of the peoples of the continent to the dramatic impact of slave trade and both in Africa and on her descendants in the Western Hemisphere. Boldly proud and beautifully written, this essential work will delight readers of African American history as well as students of great American literature. So the object here is to share with you and understand the background pertaining to one thing, and that is that Du Bois wrote this book as a response to how white folks was talking about black people. In other words, they were making claims about black people that there was no evidence, no factual reference for nothing. And what we acquired from that period of time, and we're talking about this post-Civil War period up until 1915, these ideas on who black people really were. And most of it was nothing but nonsense and rumors. Things that nobody knew, but they took it on into play. There was a thing that developed what we call pseudoscience. You know, not real science, but some shit they made up that gave this impression as if though it was legitimate. You know, why black people's lips were so big, or why we were so dark, or why we, you know, can make more babies than anybody. All of these things had their background root in nonsense. And what Du Bois decided to do as an accomplished academic, that he was going to challenge this. And remember, for a long time, you got to take into consideration from Civil War up until 1915, what was black people's level of literacy like?
Oh, there wasn't enough.
You understand what I'm saying, what I'm talking about here?
Very limited.
That's right. We was very limited in our understanding. So one of the things is taking into consideration that we had people of his caliber that could challenge that. You know, anybody know what college that that Du Bois went to?
Harvard.
Say that again?
Harvard.
Yes, he did go to Harvard. But he never called himself a Harvard man at no time. The first school he went to, 4-year college, he went to Fisk University. Fisk, he says he's a Fisk man. He said he would never say he was a Harvard man at no time. And as you know, he also, studied in Berlin. Now, the significance of that, academic experience also recognized two things. One, that a black young man was able to get into Harvard. And two, he was one of the first black persons to get a PhD at Harvard. So what that meant also was that he was rubbing shoulders with individuals who had way more money than him, but not intelligence. And that became an issue. When you got a little bit more smarts than the next guy who got more money, that don't make good experience. And you got to remember too, he grew up in Barrington, Massachusetts. Wasn't a black town, it was a white town. Black people lived in it, but predominantly white. And he was so brilliant, a student, so brilliant, a genuine organic thirst for knowledge, that the town got together and sent his ass to school. They raised money to send him to school. That's how brilliant Du Bois was, And a lot of times we don't take into consideration the role that he played. The issue was, he was an academic as well as he was a radical. I mean, like pure radical. Like communist radical. Like, knock these jokers down. Pan-Africanist radical. There would be no Pan-Africanism without Du Bois. That's a fact. No, this is history. This is a fact. We would have no Pan-Africanism without Du Bois. The 5 major Pan-African conferences, that's him. The only one he didn't run was 1900, and that was H. Sylvester Williams. But who was the guy sitting in the audience? W.E.B. Du Bois. And it's at the 5th Pan-African Congress that actually brought together the foundation that would eventually create the independence movement that would liberate Africa. I mean, this man was on a whole nother level. And we don't realize how brilliant a person we have in our midst. When we talk about Renaissance men, these multi-talented individuals in our community, there's only a few that you can recognize. And Du Bois was one of them guys, who knew a little bit about everything. There was another guy, Paul Robeson. He was a guy that spoke 16 languages, 16! This on a whole level. Gordon Parks, concert pianist, photographer, playwright, movies, come on, man. These is brilliant, brilliant brothers, and the issue is Du Bois lays the foundation. So I'm gonna start by opening up and giving you some insight in regard to when you read a book, the first thing you want to do is you want to read them blurbs, you want to know if there's a bibliography or an indexation, and the next thing you want to do is you want to read the preface to the book. The preface or the introduction, because that's going to give you some insight in where this book is going and what direction and why. And then second, it also gives you some idea on how the material is going to be couched. And usually, let me just say this. Don't think that a preface and an introduction is the same. They're not. They're going to tell you some of the same things. They might overlap, but they're going to tell you these things differently. You have a preface, you have an introduction, you have a foreword that also you'll see in the book. And then at the end, you will have an afterword. Afterward. And then they will also put in it a prologue. These are things that sum up what actually took place in the book. So a lot of times you can read the preface, you can read the introduction, you can read the prologue and not read the book and still understand what happened. Still get an idea where the material is going. And then all you read next is the what? The content. See, when you read the contents, it's telling you in subject matter what they're going to cover. That's what the contents does. But in each chapter, they explain what the content is. That's what the idea of it is. But a lot of times, that's not what we actually do. We don't even do that. We go right into reading the book.
Yep, that's true.
It's like reading a dictionary that is like trying to go to a dictionary, find out what a word, define what a word is, and you never read the introduction to the dictionary. How many people got a dictionary? Everybody got a dictionary in this here, right? Only book I know that's sold as much as the Bible is the dictionary. And the only difference between the Bible and the dictionary is people really read the dictionary. But in this preface, it's going to give you some insight. And this preface was written by W.E.B. Debois. It says this: "The time has not yet come for a complete history of the Negro peoples. Archaeological research in Africa has just begun." Let me say that again. Archaeological research in Africa has just begun. And many sources of information in Arabia, Portuguese, and other tongues are not fully at our command. If you notice, he used two particular areas. He used Arabia and Portuguese. Why do you think he used those two areas? And not, say, Africa or Europe? Go ahead, bro.
Because they were some of the conquerors in the past.
They were some of the conquerors, but the issue is, why those two countries? There was a lot of people that was conquerors, but why those two?
They were strongest at that time.
They were strongest? No.
Weren't the Arabs slave drivers or holders before anybody else?
That is correct. She got it right. That's
Repeat
it.
that again?
Yeah.
Say it again, my dear.
I said the Arabs were slave drivers or holders before anybody else.
Right. The only difference is that on the European side, the earliest slave trader was who? Portuguese. No, not Spanish. Portuguese.
Because the Portuguese got it from the Arabs.
No. The Portuguese got it from the church.
That's right. The Catholic Church to begin with.
When the Pope divided the country,
No. That's a different time period. Came when Pope Alexander VI. That's in 1492. That's a different time period. The time period we're talking about when Portuguese got involved, that's with Pope Nicholas V. And he did that in 1445, 1450. And what he did was he literally gave Portugal the whole west coast of Africa. That means that all slaves that were brought to anywhere out of Africa had to go by way of the Portuguese. So if Spain wanted to get labor, they had to go to the Portuguese and ask them for labor. See, this is why we don't understand the mechanics of why certain things take place in a certain time period and why certain individuals. Like in America, we talk about American history and slavery is talked about from 1619. But what needs to be explained about that is that's the English period. You had a Spanish period that goes way back farther than that. The oldest city in America is St. Augustine, Florida,
Which is Spanish.
which is a Spanish colony.
Named after a black man, St. Louis.
And then you had the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Dutch, Look, America is named after, New York is named after a Dutch city. It's Amsterdam, New Amsterdam. They were talking about, he was talking about drugs, and before they took opium, that was brought to America by the Dutch East Indian Company. Go find out who Henry Hudson is and who he worked for. That big river y'all got out over there, go find out who he is and who he worked for, how he got his name on that damn river, and why he came to New York. And believe me, it ain't nice. But let me go on anyway. It says that the Portuguese and other tongues are not fully at our command. And let me just say what he's talking about. It says that this time has not yet come for a complete history of the Negro people. Archaeological research in Africa has just begun, and many sources of information in Arabia, Portuguese, and other tongues are not fully at our command, meaning we don't read Portuguese or Arabic yet. That's all he's saying. It says that, and two, it must frankly be confessed, racial prejudice against darker people is still too strong in so-called civilized centers for judicial appraisement of the peoples of Africa. In other words, the mentality of how people thought about Africans was so bottomed out, it was so low that to talk sense and logical, rational to these individuals was like off the Richter scale, because they had no clue that Africans could have produced anything of value to the world. You know, only thing that come from Africa is darkness.
The darkness.
Right. It says that much intensive monographic work in history and science is needed to clear mooted points and quiet the controversialists who mistake present personal desire for scientific proof. Debois is saying, look, all that nonsense y'all talking about, ain't none of that shit science. So in order for me to really take you seriously, you got to give me something with some evidence and some proof. If not, what you talking about is like spitting in the wind. It don't have no value unless it get hit by somebody. But in this case, he's letting them know that it's not worth anything. Let me go on. It says, nevertheless, I have not been able to withstand the temptation to essay such short general statement of the main known facts and their fair interpretation as shall enable the general reader to know as men a sixth or more of the human race. And what he was talking about there is he's written this book in a very plain and inacademic way, so that the average person could read the material and grasp from it some real basic facts with evidence of what that particular contribution that black people made in the world being legitimate, and that they would take that seriously. See, for other people speaking it, they don't take it serious because the white community, the academic community, says that you don't have no scholarship to be even talking about that. See, now you could be you could get a YouTube podcast and you can be a scholar tomorrow. No more. Everybody's a journalist now. Ain't never went to journalist school, don't know how to ask a question, none of that. Don't even understand the politics of the industry in which they work, much less the history about the subject matter in which they're talking about. Most journalists that are real journalists, they spend most of their time doing research. That's what journalists do. That's what they do, spend most of their time doing research, or have a team of jokers doing the research in order to literally come up with valid, concrete, evidence-oriented facts that gonna give them what we call meat and potatoes about a subject matter.
It's in the content creators.
Well, content creators are also based by the individuals who have the audience at their disposal. See, the difference is if I'm writing something and ain't nobody gonna read what I'm writing, it don't mean nothing. But if I'm writing something and I get 10,000 people to read it and they don't know too much about nothing anyway, and they see it, to them, it might be legitimate. So it's a lot of people that think in 2020, Donald Trump won an election. They really believe that. Now, we all might know otherwise, but what they telling you is something else. It's like I just told you about the sunrise. No matter how much you say it, it still ain't gonna rise. It just ain't. But let me go on. It says, nevertheless, I have not been able to withstand the temptation to essay such short general statements of the main known facts and their fair interpretation as shall enable the general reader to know as men a sixth or more of the human race. Manifestly, so short a story must be mainly conclusion and generalizations with but meager indications of authorities and underlining arguments. Possibly, if the public will, a later and larger book may be more satisfactory on these points. This particular was written by W.E.B. Debois in New York City, February 1st, 1950. 1950. The man was on a whole nother level. The first chapter opens up. Now, we're talking about the Negro. I keep telling you, we talk about the Negro, but the first chapter is on Africa. The first thing that shows is that he is showing you the relationship between that Negro and this Africa. And he's showing you that the relationship is direct. It ain't like it's almost, could it be, you know, like I was telling y'all last time I was here, like I got 13% of Nigerian. That shit is funny to me, you know, because I've studied a little bit of molecular biology, and I know there's no percentage in genetics. That's not how they read genetics. And most of all, we're not reading the material correctly. We think that when it says 13% Nigerian, we think that we got 13% of what's in us is Nigerian. No. What it's saying is that you have a 13% chance that the Nigerian has a sequence code that's similar to the one that you have. That's all it means. That is 13% the same. That's all it means. That somewhere in your line, in your genetic line, that you and that Nigerian got an ancestor that's the same. And it's a 13% chance. So if I told you right now it's a 13% chance it's going to rain, would you take an umbrella with you? You get where I'm coming from? But y'all running around, I'm Nigerian! That's not how you read that.
So what happened to Nigerian when they do a test?
It's no difference. Genetics is genetics, no matter where you at. The issue is that you have sequence codes in your system that are based on two people. That means your daddy and your mommy. Your mommy had 23 chromosomes and your daddy had 23 chromosomes. They bind together, make 46. Nature shake them jokers up like dice and throw them out. The sequence code that you get is the one those dice numbers throw. That means that number that comes out is nobody in the world is going to have that sequence code but you.
But there are
That's what scientists say.
Okay, but there's such a thing as phenotype. Right?
Yeah, but phenotype don't got nothing to do with sequence code. Phenotype is your outward appearance. That's all it is. Right, how you look on the outside. That's a phenotype.
But I don't got my lips.
Say that again?
More full of.
What lips got to do with it? Africans are the foundation to all to all characteristics that exist. That means there's no characteristics, whether it's straight hair, short hair, whether it's kinky hair, whether it's big ears, big nose, thick nose, slit nose, whether it's chinky eyes or whatever. It's all African.
That's no doubt. They have.
The issue is that the difference in regard to dissimulation, and this is what even Debois knew in 1915, and that is that based on climate change and geography determines your outward extremities. It determines, they call it Glodger's law, Allen's law, and Bergman's law. In anthropology, it defines how tall you are, how short you are, whether you're going to have dark eyes or light eyes, whether you're going to have kinky hair or you're going to have straight hair. All of that has a lot to do with environment. It has a lot to do with genetics.
Absolutely. So
it's a hand in glove kind of relationship.
We deal with possibility and probability too.
But the issue is that was the whole issue of why the study by Darwin and the whole issue of evolution became an issue, was because they wanted to see whether there was what you are talking about, whether over time there was a change and whether that change was legitimate based on X, Y, or Z. So what Darwin did was he went to these islands called the archipelagos, and he found these birds, finches, and he found out that on one island they had short beaks and on the other island they had long beaks. And he wanted to know why the same bird gonna have two different beaks. And he realized when he began to watch them observe what they were eating, he found out that the ones on one island where they was getting food, it was very accessible. On the other ones, they had to go through wood and stuff to get it, so their beaks was longer to get through and do it. And he realized that this particular one on this island grew out of this one on this island. Now, but the issue is that that's not just a prerequisite. He was looking at to find out the process of how evolution actually worked, even though it wasn't foolproof at the time. But it gave a different idea about how we seen the world. Up until that time, most of the people in the world, how do you think people got to be in human beings? How do you think? Up until Darwin, how do you think people thought people came into existence?
They were created.
The sperm.
Go ahead.
They were created as humans from the beginning. In other words, they didn't evolve. God created them.
Well, how could that be?
But that's what they thought. That's what they thought.
No, but anybody else? Anybody? Where do you think human beings came from? Before that, where do you think people thought human beings came from?
From the apes.
No. That story, apes don't come until Darwin. In other words, without evolution, nobody knows nothing about no apes. Right. So the issue is that up until that time, most people thought, based on the Bible, that we were created by God.
That's what she does.
No. Yeah, but she said a human being at once. No, that's not how that worked. The issue is that the story is based on, remember now, the story that you read in the Bible is based on events, just like I told you, the events of the sun. Now, they were talking about something that they wasn't there when it happened. But they had to come up with some story to give some explanation that they knew what was going on. Because the person that's telling these stories are defined as special people in that society. They are either the medicine man or the priest, one or the other. And they are looked up to because they know the mechanics of what goes on in their environment. See, so these things become important. So up until that time, everything involving what we knew about the world came from religious backgrounds. Not just the Bible, but every particular religious tradition on earth. It could be Yoruba, it could be Akan, it could be, Egyptian, it could, whatever. You go to Egypt, they got like 20 different creation stories. One to say that, we were created from ejaculation. One will say that we were created from the moisture of the sky. It depends on which story in what area of Egypt is making this claim. Because first of all, we got this idea that when we see Egypt, we see all these people and everybody was the same. No.
Yeah, that's what.
First of all, there was no such thing as the Egyptian civilization. It did not exist. Let me say that again. There was no such thing as the Egyptian civilization. It didn't exist. There was the Nile Valley civilization. That did exist. But not Egyptian. Because in order for Egypt to have a civilization, it had to have a culmination from the beginning where that Nile began all the way to where it ended in the Mediterranean. And the only way they got it, because when you see the pyramids, it's all the way north. But where that Nile starts is in the south. Remember this, the Nile River is the only river on earth that starts in two different places. Let me say that again. It's the only river on earth that starts in two different places. The Nile River starts at the beginning in Ethiopia at Lake Tana. That's called the Blue Nile. The White Nile is all the way on, excuse me? No, the White Nile is at the base of the Ruwenzori Mountains in between Uganda and Egypt. Those two beginnings come together. That means that they flow into a north, down, because remember, where they begin is in the mountain area. That's why Egypt is called Lower Egypt. It's not to be called Lower Egypt because, like the guy tell me, well, the Nile River is the only river that flows up. I said, you've been smoking something, homie. What water flows up? What are you, stupid? Gravity gonna let water flow up? No, it's the only river that in the southern regions where them two rivers began, that's in mountain areas. So when the snow-capped mountains began to melt, those waters run down into that apex, into a place we call the Sudan in Khartoum. That's when them two rivers meet. And then from there, it goes another 3,000 miles all the way to the Mediterranean. This is the Nile. But most of us don't know that. We don't have a clue. The Nile is a river that in some places you could walk across it. And in other places it looked just like an ocean. I mean, like a real ocean.
Oh, so Moses did walk part and went through it.
No, don't get this twisted now. Look, again, I keep telling you that we're talking about history. History is based on evidence and facts. Evidence and facts. Religion is based on what? No.
Stories.
No.
Believe.
No. What he just said is based on belief. Faith and belief. Faith and belief. That's the underpinning to all religion. That you got to accept what we tell them without question. So if somebody tell you, you know, Jesus is your Lord and Savior, what would you say?
Jesus is my Lord and Savior. Come and save me.
Well, I would say this. You're going to have a problem because if he didn't save himself, how you think he's going to save you? Now, I'm just basing it on what the story stood. The story said that his ass got hung.
Stone.
No, he literally was executed. So that means one thing, no matter how much God he might have been, he didn't save himself. If he could have, do you think he would have?
Yep.
Do you think that he called up to his father asking for, like, Pops, what's up? I'm hanging here.
Why have you forsaken me?
In Latin, they call it Eli, Eli, back to me. Father, Father, why have thou forsaken me? Which really means, in common English, Pops, why you leave me hanging? You leave me hanging.
On a rope. You stone.
Jesus ain't that deep. Now, this is not an attack against anybody's religion. I just want to say, based on the storyline, Jesus ain't that deep.
Allegorical. It's deep.
Well, it's not an issue of allegorical. If we accept the story as being true, let's say that the story is true. If we accept the story as being true, Jesus still ain't all that nothing. Because Jesus didn't create himself. Ask, did his father create himself? Did Jesus' father create himself? That's case closed. You get what I'm saying? But let me go on. Now, this particular first chapter deals with Africa, and it's dealing with Africa in a way where that it's giving us an insight in regard to how we see things. You know, again, this is 1915. He's making this claim versus, let's say, when Dr. Ben and Dr. Carr in 1980 or in 1990. Now, you just listen to what I'm saying, and this is Debois talking in 1915. Africa is at once the most romantic and the most tragic of continents. Its very names reveal its mystery and wide-reaching influence. It is the Ethiopia, quote-unquote, of the Greeks, the Kush and Punt of the Egyptians, and the Arabian land of the blacks. To modern Europe, it is the dark continent and land of contrasts. In literature, it is the seat of the Sphinx and the lotus eaters, the home of the dwarfs, gnomes, and pixies, and the refuge of the gods in commerce. It is the slave mart and the source of ivory, ebony, rubber, gold, and diamonds. What other continent can rival in interest this ancient of days? There are those, nevertheless, who would write universal history and leave out Africa. But how, asked Ratzel, can one leave out the land of Egypt and Carthage? And Frobenius declares that in future Africa, much more and more be regarded as the integral part of the great movement of world history. Yet, it is true that the history of Africa is usually, and its strangeness is due in no small degree to the physical peculiarities of the continent. Anybody know what that means? The peculiarities of the continent.
Mystery?
No, it's really talking about variety. In other words, Africa is 12 million square miles, 12 million. Out of that 12 million square miles, there's more diversity. There's more diversity on those 12 million square miles. There's more diversity in Africa than all of the other people on earth put together. That means if you took all other people and you put them together and you had all these different kinds of people, there would be more different kinds of people in Africa than you could put with all of them together.
DEI.
What that means is that Africa would be defined as the birthplace of humanity because all peoples literally defines themselves by coming from there. In other words, on earth, let me just say this and I want to be clear. On earth, there is no such but one group of people that is indigenous to land. That means Chinese people are not indigenous to China. Mexican people are not indigenous to Mexico. Inuit, or what we call Eskimos, are not indigenous to Alaska. Africa is indigenous. The term is autochthonous, which means that they actually rise from the land from which they actually were birthed.
What's that word?
autochthonous, A-U-T-H something or other. Y'all gotta get me, let me get my phone out and find out. Autochthonous. Autochthonous and indigenous are similar, but autochthonous means that you actually came from the land. That means you didn't migrate there. See, people that live in China, somebody migrated there. People that live in Europe, somebody migrated there. People that live in South and Central America, somebody migrated there. There's a group now, I guess they call them descendants of their own or whatever. These groups are now talking about that you have original Africans here. Like I said, it's just that there might be some dark people and there might be some dark people. But Africans, that's not how you work that.
Aboriginals.
You know, yeah, but even when you talk about Aboriginals, who determines at what point what an African is? If I asked you right now, if I asked you, is jazz African music? Or is it African American music? Could jazz have been made only in Africa? No, not maybe. The issue is, what evidence do we have for it? The issue is the evidence say that the word itself means that it's a combination of what our experience here is and what our experience in Africa was. That's where blues come from, and that's where hymnals come from, and that's where gospel comes from. All of these have their roots in that. The problem is that we do not understand the progression. So we have this idea that we look at one in its variation to another. And if that was the case, that would give this idea that we seen ourselves as Africans. There was no such a person. There's no such a thing as an African at a certain time. We don't realize this. We get this idea that, you know, like a guy told me, he said, well, Africans sold Africans in the slave trade. I said, that's kind of impossible. He said, well, how could it be? He said, I seen it. I said, you didn't see it. You seen Yorubas selling Igbos. You seen Tukula selling, you know, Mandink. You selling Soninke selling Ashanti. There's no Africans. You just got groups of people who looking at other groups of people as their friends or their enemies, not because they black. That's some new shit y'all come up with. Africans didn't define themselves on blackness. They defined themselves on culture and language and customs and areas of geography and all of these things. But we running around talking about how black we were. And nobody was looking at that, because when he sold your ass to the other guy because you was his enemy, he wasn't talking about how black he was. He was talking about, now that joke is out of my hair. That's why that Africans didn't sell Africans. But the issue is that because we do not know what and now. Anybody know how you got to be an African? How do you know that Africa is a continent? How do you know?
Somebody else named it such.
No, it's not an issue of who named it. The issue is, if I ask you right now, what is a continent? Anybody? What is a continent?
It's a land.
But how do you know?
Because we learned it.
Say that again?
We learned it in school.
No, not learning in school. How do you know that a continent is a continent?
Description.
Wait a minute, what did he just say? Right. How it's described, right? How can you describe a continent?
Being surrounded by water.
I'm asking you how. I didn't ask you what it is. I'm asking you how. How can I know this is if you say it's a body of land that's surrounded by water, how do I know that?
I map it.
No.
You compare,
Close, but no.
compare it to other things.
No. The only way you know a continent is a continent is you got to be in an airplane looking down at it. There's no other way. You can get a rudimentary idea, an outline of what you might think a continent is, but you ain't high enough to see the whole thing.
But that didn't come until the 1920s.
Go ahead. So what it means? What it means, that means that, yeah, but what it means is that recently Recently, only until recently did we have any clue on what a continent was.
Until the 1920s.
So right now, if you go back and you look at an Olympic flag, how many rings it got on it?
5.
5. How many continents do they say exist right now?
7.
Well, how you gonna have 7 continents and 5 rings?
But 2 of them, well,
No, because when they created that flag, they had only defined 5 continents that way. Because what the brother back there said is true. It's the difference between an island and a continent is size. It's supposed to be a large body of land completely surrounded by water. That's a continent. Island is a small body of land completely surrounded by water. Yes, sir.
I'm always fascinated by this one called island. It's called Madagascar. When you really call Madagascar, which is they call it an island off of Africa, it's huge. It's 1,000 feet long, 1,000 miles long.
Yeah. Yeah, but that ain't all that deep. It ain't Australia big. You know what I'm saying? If it was really that big, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But you got to remember, Africa got a lot of islands around it. Madeiran Islands, what do they call that? Count Verde. All of these islands that you have in different areas in Africa, off the coast of Africa. But one of the things that is important is that a lot of these terms are made up because those are terms that were defined by areas in which they control. So it wasn't an issue that we knew all of this. The farther back you go, there's a thing called cartography. Anybody ever heard of it? Right, what is it?
map making.
Map making, correct. The further back you go in map making, you'll find out that maps get cruder and cruder and cruder. That means that they're not detailed. They're not showing you land and places, and it's just showing you an outline. Because they just wasn't clear about what was land and what was a coastline and all of these things. And what we have is this idea that we knew what a continent actually was. And we didn't. We just didn't. And it wasn't until recently that these things became really, really clear and well known, where the discipline of cartography became a major focus for individuals to, one, record and document these things and what was taking place. Like a lady was telling me, well, you know, we named Africa when the planet was one.
What?
Like when the whole planet, like right now you got different continents. All them continents came together at one time. Or not at one time, many times. The only difference is that when that happened, there was no human beings. They call it tectonic plating or continental drift. When those things took place, the last time was 500 million years ago. Come on! 500 million, dinosaurs died 65 million years ago. The dinosaurs would not have been in existence for another 40 million years. The dinosaurs. And yet we talking about we got some clue. You know, again, we hear stuff and we see stuff on the internet and we take it, oh, continental drift. When the planet was all one. A guy said to me, he said, because what had happened was it all started about this thing called Pangea. So I said to him, he said, well, that's when we named the planet Pangea. I said, are you okay? I said, where did you get that? So he couldn't tell me. I said, well, the issue is that obviously you heard it from somewhere. You didn't know actually what it was. It sounded good, so now you're going to use it in your, setup. But you don't have a clue where it came from. There's a guy by the name of Arthur Wegener. He was the individual who came up with the concept. And the issue of continental drift literally was based on the very nature of understanding that all of the continents that you see on Earth today are actually like pieces of a puzzle that we all fitted together.
That's true.
Excuse me?
I said it seems to be true.
Yeah, but the issue is, the only difference is that it's based on a concept that no human was here to see.
Okay.
In other words, there was nobody living, there was no human life or anything at that particular time. And the second thing is that we're talking about the planet Earth. Science says about 4.5 billion years old. That means it's 4,500,000,000. The planet Earth. The universe around 14 billion. You know, again, we're talking about, you know, estimations in regard to, but one thing we know, they're close enough, you know, to give us some insight.
Like the word that you was talking about, autophagus.
Autophagus. Yeah. Spell it for them.
Okay, that's A like an apple, U like an umbrella, T like in Tom, O like in Oscar, C like in Charlie, H like in Harry, T like in Tom, H like in Harry, O like in Arthur. Excuse me. Not O like in Oscar.
Olive.
Yes. Olive. N like in Nancy. O like in Olive, U like in umbrella, and S like in Sam. Again. A like in apple, U like in umbrella, T like in Tom, O like in Oscar, C like in Charlie, H like in Harry, T like in Tom, H like in Harry, O like in Oscar, N like in Nancy, O like in Oscar, and U like in umbrella, and S like in Sam.
And read to them what it says.
Okay, doctors.
It says, let me show you how to pronounce it. Orthoctonous. Orthoctonous.
It's a funny spelling word.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, that is an adjective that means indigenous, native, or originated in the place where it is found. It comes from the Greek words odo, self, and chthon, earth. Krypton.
Right, in other words, we came from this earth. There's no other people on earth can make that claim. Nobody. And the reason that is because all of them, they came from us.
Right.
There's only one group that existed that came at a time that didn't come directly from us, and that's Neanderthals. So those are the first white people in Europe. That's correct.
All right.
Before there's white people that you know today.
Can you explain that to me, please?
Neanderthals are what is called a different species of humans.
Not Homo sapiens.
Let me explain something to you. When human beings came on this earth, there were different types of human beings. There wasn't just one. There was different ones. And some of them lived and some of them died out. And then eventually they all died out. And the only ones that were left was us.
Oh.
Right, so, but most humans get this idea that we was the only humans on earth. No, that's not how that worked. And see, the second thing is that what it also means is that wherever you see people on earth, they didn't originate there, they migrated there. That's what the evidence provides for us now. Not just migratory evidence, meaning archaeological, physical remains of things. We're also talking about molecular biology. In other words, we trace the genetic migration of humans through genes. And we're able to do that. So we know that when this gene left Africa, it ended up over here. And this gene ended up over here. That's how they look at the relationship between your ancestor and his ancestor being similar. You might not be him, but y'all both have a common ancestor somewhere in your line. But even though y'all might get completely different groups of individuals, you might end up as an Asian and he end up as an African.
But I still don't understand what Neanderthal means in relation to white people, because I thought that the Neanderthal migrated just like everybody else into the caves and stuff.
There's no migration. They were the first well, before Homo sapiens even went to Europe, they had already been there 350,000 years.
The Neanderthal?
Neanderthal. The word Neanderthal comes from the Neander Valley. It's a place in Germany. That's where they first did the first discoveries of what they called Neanderthal. It was a big fight. And the British were really upset. And that's why I tell you that I was telling you about how corrupt the book business is. If I tell you how corrupt the freaking anthropology and history is,
The
we'd
book
be here
business
for,
look like nothing.
that's right, we'd be here for, you think they having a war in Iran? Listen. And then we running around talking about, you know, teaching history, accurate history, all of this kind of stuff, as if though that before what they doing now, like they was teaching real history, like they was teaching, listen, history been corrupt from day one. And there's always been alternative history. That's just, any historian knows that. Everybody that talks about, let's say, let's say Pearl Harbor. There's good books about Pearl Harbor and bad books. I'm just talking about in quality of books. But there's different points of view about Pearl Harbor. Why did Pearl Harbor started, why it did all of this. And every book is taken into context in regard to the story, because every book, no matter how bad it might bring some new insight in regard to the study. That's what it's all about.
Say that again, Trust.
That when a researcher is doing research, what they do is they look for material that supports an idea or an hypothesis that they have about an event or a subject matter. Now, usually they look for things that support their claim, but a lot of time in the research they find things that are antithetical, that actually go against what they're looking at.
Right.
Now, an honest historian is going to deal with that. That means he ain't going to throw it out the window and say, oh, I ain't going to use that because it's going to mess my whole thing up. No. The object is that you got to tell the truth the way the facts and the evidence unfold. If you don't, then you creating your own story, like most individuals do.
The Chancellor went
Right.
beyond the call in his book. Was he telling?
Well, he does. The issue is that, but every historian does, because they have a vested interest in telling the story that provides for them a certain insight, a certain like, a certain look. That's what it's always been about. And we have to begin to take into consideration, if we want to see the history in a certain way, then we got to do the legwork. You can't say that, you know, they're not telling the truth if you don't know what the truth is.
Right.
Walter said they invited them to there, and then said they started Pearl Harbor. They was blowing stuff up.
Whatever.
Yeah, but the story is that there's, whenever, like for instance, we write a history right now. There's a history of Egypt. Matter of fact, before Charles Finch passed, he had wrote a complete history of ancient Egypt. Now, up until that time, there was a lot of African scholars that have written subject matters pertaining to Egypt, but not a complete history. No African has written a complete history of Egypt, and he did. 10,000 years he did. And Charles Finch.
He died this year.
And the thing about that is that most of the history that we know of Egypt comes from white people. Now, it comes from them, and that's not to say because it comes from white people, it's bad. That's not what I'm saying. It just happens to be they was in positions of authority to dictate material in a certain way, and they literally did so. So a lot of the material that was written by early white individuals, because they was the ones that went and did the research. We wasn't doing no research then.
We couldn't.
Right. Well, we could. The issue is that our research were done in different areas. Like for instance, they are talking about Egyptians. We was the Egyptians. In other words, they're writing stories about us, but they don't take that we have stories about ourselves. They didn't take those stories as legitimate. So a lot of the stories that were taken and told, we looked at them as mythological figures and things that had no value in real history. And when you're writing about history, all history starts like that. Because your ass wasn't there. You wasn't there when they started the first brick. You wasn't there when the first people laid down. You wasn't there when human beings came to be human. But yet, everybody talking about it. Everybody talking about it. I asked a guy, he said in the Bible, in the beginning it was Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve. How many people is that, y'all?
2.
Okay. And if Adam and Eve had kids, how many kids did they have?
3.
3.
2 boys and a girl?
No,
Adam, Cain, Abel, and Seth.
Say that again?
Cain, Abel, and Seth.
Oh yeah, that's a little laughter, yes. But the issue is that in that story, you ain't gonna find that in Genesis 1 or 2.
And then when
In other words, there's 2 Genesis stories, two stories of how humans were made. That's in Genesis 1:24 and then in Genesis 2:7. The issue is that why is it 2 stories? If it's only happened once, why is it 2 stories? But what it represents for those that study theology, we know that the 2 stories are based on 2 different sources from which the material came. So there was one group that said that this was the beginning and another group that said that this was the beginning. So what they decided to do was put it all together. It's like saying that all Hebrews are Jews. No, that's not how that works. You know what I mean? The issue is that how many brothers did Judah have?
12.
You've been smoking something, stop it.
Yo, I said 12.
I said you've been smoking something,
Okay,
stop
then
it.
prove it wasn't.
Easy, because Joseph was already in Egypt. He was sold for his coats of many colors, and he worked for the Egyptian government. When Jacob came into Egypt in Exodus, go to Exodus chapter 1, Exodus, you'll find out that when Jacob came there, he had 11 sons. 11. Because one of them was already there. That's how he got in. You ain't read the book. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of Christians that don't read the book. They ain't read the book. You know what I'm saying?
You read
In the
it,
book.
but you don't analyze it.
Well, that's again, but that's not reading then. That's what I'm trying to do for you here, is to show you that reading is not regurgitating words. It's actually discussing the material in deep context so you understand the meaning behind what is being said. Debois wrote something. Do you understand what he wrote? Not do I know it. Knowing is not enough. Understanding. If I said, do you knowledge of self, what would you rather have? Knowledge of self or understanding of self?
understanding, sure.
Come on. So the issue is you want to get to that level where you become the what? What does it say? Right. You become the thinker. The object is to think. That's your main objective, is to think. And if you know how to think, you will know how to study. If you know how to study, you will understand that knowledge. You will understand it.
Then the wisdom.
Right. When you understand knowledge, you get what?
Wisdom.
Wisdom. When you understand that knowledge, you get wisdom. But again, you know, we're not going, a lot of us, we're not consuming the information to understand. We just want to be to say, I know it. You know, it's like a guy who cheated on the test. If the teacher asks him, oh, you got 100%, Billy? And he said, yes, teacher, I studied all night. He said, on the first question, how'd you get that answer?
I had it on my hand.
You don't have no explanation. And that's what most teachers, that's why most kids think that they can fool a teacher. Now the teacher is a teacher.
Oh, really?
And you think you're going to fool a guy that actually is the one that's dishing it out. Now I'm not saying that you can't get away with some things. All of us know that. But the reality is most of the people that do those things think that when they get away with it, that they can do it again and again and again, and that's when they do what? Get caught.
Right. That's why you got essay questions.
Right.
To explain yourself.
Well, the issue about the essay questions is really understanding your knowledge of any subject matter. How well do you really know it? See, my thing is, I don't care whether you get the right answer or the wrong answer. I want to know whether you understand the mechanics of how you came to either or.
Right, how did you arrive at that?
Right. And as long as you do that, I don't care whether you got it right or wrong. I don't care. I want to know that you went through the legwork in order to get there. And that you understand what that legwork is. If you do, then I know for 1,000 times to $1 that you got it. But most people, they don't. That's why they read this page and get on this page and they forgot what happened on the other page. Because they reading it because they are identifying terms. Reading is about events. It's about events. Stop trying to retain names and places and dates versus the events. Find out the events first. All that other stuff, names, dates, places, all that shit is gonna come. When you say Reconstruction, I don't care what time it was. If you know what happened, that's gonna suffice. Because you're gonna find out that Reconstruction happened between the Civil War and Jim Crow. That's a fact. I don't know, you don't have to know which each one of them happened. You don't have to know the date, each one of them, but you know that everybody that knows history knows that Jim Crow had at a certain time and the Civil War was at a certain time. So Reconstruction was right in the middle. If I said the Great Migration, that happened at a time. When this book was written in 1915, when was the Great Migration? Come on now.
1948.
1940. How could you mean 1948? The Great Migration in 1948?
It has to be right in there.
The Grapes of Wrath migration? That one was.
There's no such thing as Grapes of Wrath migration. We talk about the great, when you use the word Great Migration, only one come up.
Go ahead, Paul.
Say that again? Around that time, that's good, because we're talking about at the end of the end of Reconstruction, and then when Jim Crow comes into play, what happens? What happens after, well, let me give you all a scenario so you can put these events together. There was a thing called the Civil War, right? Y'all remember that?
Yeah.
Who was president when that was taking place?
Lincoln.
Right. So what did Lincoln make a major claim to fame for black people?
40 acres of land.
No, forget the 40 acres.
Proclamation.
Say that again?
Announcement.
No, stop.
Seriously, your
No, listen. Lincoln was the individual before the Civil War started. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. Now, Lincoln was the individual who was the president at that time, correct?
Yes.
Right. Now, the important thing of what that represents is, one, that Lincoln was there, but also that there was events that were taking place that literally put in play why he did what he did. The most important thing about the Civil War was based on an event. Based on an event that was based on some legislation.
Sending us to Africa?
No. It's called the 13th Amendment. Remember, what's the 13th Amendment?
That slavery is abolished.
That's correct. That's enough. Slavery is abolished. 13th Amendment. And then after that, the 14th Amendment.
Black men can vote.
No. Citizenship. Right. See, remember, all of these things come into play during Lincoln's period. Why? Because it wasn't because Lincoln had a lot of love for black people.
No, sending us to Africa.
No, that's not. Who said that?
The one that found Liberia.
Say that again?
That's how we got to Liberia.
No.
That's the other.
No, you look, again, do yourself a favor. Like I keep saying this again.
That's Monroe.
That has nothing to do with Monroe either, but do yourself a favor. There's information that you have heard, but you never studied it. I say, to validate what you heard, go do the study. Right. So Liberia and Lincoln is very far apart. Very far apart. Lincoln is the 16th president. Think of Liberia when it got its place. Like she said about James Monroe. I'm saying is that you got to think of what was going on at that particular time. And Liberia wasn't the first place anyway. It was Sierra Leone. And that was Paul Cuffey. Right, Paul Cuffey was the first individual that take 38 individuals to Africa.
Before Marcus.
Marcus ain't take nobody to Africa, not one person.
Well, who was the president?
Dr. Ben took more people to Africa than any person I know on earth. I don't know nobody that took more people to Africa than Dr. Ben. I don't know. Now, I'm saying that it could be. I know it's a lot of airlines might have did, but I'm talking about actually took their hands and took them to Africa. I don't know nobody that took more people to Africa than Dr. Ben. I don't know nobody. One time they took, what, 800-900 people? Come on. But the issue is that in the history of repatriation, Dr. Ben's name ain't coming up. Marcus's name is coming up. And Marcus didn't take one person. Not one. Paul Cuffey took 38. That's a fact. And he made his arrangement with the British government, and that's why Sierra Leone was the first country. But in Liberia, the issue was the American Colonization Society. That's who brought people to Liberia. Ain't got nothing to do with no president, none of that shit. They owned it, the Liberian, lock, stock, and barrel. So much so, that's why President Monroe and all that shit came in, because they took, the Americans' position was this. See, we got this idea that black people decided that we gonna leave America and go back to Africa. That shit ain't happened.
No way.
And no, we're not even close. And then second is that the American Colonization Society was a religious organization that was going, trying to colonize resources in Africa. And why did they do that? Because prior to that, Paul Cuffey was the guy. None of them had ever made no trips or nothing there. Paul Cuffey was a Quaker. He was a shipbuilder. And he also knew business. So what he decided to do, excuse me?
He took them on his ship.
Yeah, he built a ship. He took them to Liberia when he took them to Sierra Leone. And when he got there, he contracted malaria and died. And what happened is that when the individuals got back to the United States, the American Colonization Society found out how lucrative that process that he laid in place was. So they jumped on it and took it and ran with it. The American Colonization Society was a religious right-wing organization. They the same organization that sent Blyden, to Africa. We talk about, Blyden, the greatest Pan-Africanist, but he was sent by some religious jokers who they thought that they was gonna go over there and colonize, Africa. And he went over there and found out how the Muslims and Islam was really more compatible to culture and lifestyle in Africa, so he wrote a book about it. Islam, Christianity, and the Negro race. Go read it.
Paul Coffey?
Say it again?
Paul Coffey?
No. I'm talking about Edward Blyden. The one they called Father of Pan-Africanism. Which it's kind of funny that he would think like that, but when you read his writings and all of that, he was searching himself. He wasn't all, in one particular mode of thought. But when these things happen, we have to begin to understand the people that was involved. One of the people that created that was Kermit Roosevelt, the nephew or grandson, I think it was. Nephew or grandson of Roosevelt. He was involved in creating Liberia. He did some other stuff in some World War shit too. But the thing that gets me most of all is that we know of history. Let me say that again. We know of history. That means we know of it. We didn't really check it out. We didn't really study it. So what I'm saying is that when you think you know of something, before you start talking about it and sharing it with individuals, go Google that stuff. It's going to give you basic information that could take you either further or away. But basic information. So if I want to know when the 13th Amendment started, you should be able to know that if we talking about when black people was freed from slavery. And if we talking about the emancipation, what did it do? Were we really emancipated?
No.
If we wasn't, then why would we need the 13th Amendment?
It look good on paper.
Again, it always. And the funniest thing that got me about the Emancipation Proclamation was when I first seen the word emancipate, I said something is wrong. How can you emancipate a proclamation? A proclamation is to proclaim something. Emancipate is to free something. You can only proclaim what you free, and you can't free what you're proclaiming. That don't make sense.
That's what Alton said.
It's just stupid. But yet, that's how we publish it. But if you go read the document, the actual document, that's not what it said.
Wow.
It's like saying, like I heard somebody was saying something about the Freedmen's Bureau. And a lot of people don't know that the Freedmen's Bureau is where you get Howard University from. Howard University is named after a white man named Jonathan Oliver O. Howard. He had his arm cut off in the Civil War. He created the Freedmen's Bureau. And all of that was about, it was originally called the land of displaced and freed such and such. And what had happened was Sherman, at the end of the war, was taking over plantations. And when the plantation was taken over, all of the slaves that were on that plantation, they were just free. They were let loose. But they didn't have nowhere to go or anything, so they kept following General Sherman from place to place. So he wrote a letter back to Washington and told him, look, man, we got all of these freaking people. They following me everywhere. He said, man, I can't get what I need to get done. He said, y'all gonna have to find something to do with them. So they created an article. It's called Article 15. Article 15 was based on what we would call displaced Africans and poor white individuals that was looking for refuge after the Civil War. And the Freedmen's Bureau was going to give them help. Now, out of the Freedmen's Bureau is where you get Howard University and all of these black schools, is because most of those schools wasn't set up for black people. Let me say that again. Most of those schools were not set up for black people. They were set up for mulatto people. Because the mulatto people had a double allegiance. That means that the mulatto had an allegiance to the black community and allegiance to his white father. So if I just send a black guy to the college, you know, what I'm trying to get this black guy educated so he can shoot an arrow in my ass? No. I'll get the as they call the mulatto, and make those individuals as the first forerunners, and they'll be the buffer state between us and the black people.
You got that today, isn't that something?
Think about that.
What's the name of the person? Howard University, you said?
General Oliver O. Howard. Go look him up. General Oliver O. Howard. You'll find it of interesting story.
The article was written under amendment, right? It was written under amendment. The article was part of amendment.
What?
Now Article 15?
No, the Field Article 15, that's what it's called.
Oh, Field.
Field Article 15.
Oh, Field.
But most of us know it as 40 Acres and a Mule.
You said Oliver Howard.
General Oliver O. Howard.
Wait, 4.
All you gotta do is Google him, he gonna come up. Shit. And if you look at the administration of Howard University then, it just shocked your ass to death, because everybody was white.
Right.
Everybody was
White!
most
see-
all of the historical black colleges.
Well, not all of them, shit. Bethune-Cookman College was black people. Shit, she wasn't taking no money from nobody. She was blacker than that freaking fan over there.
That was her.
Shit,
But most of
Bethune-Cookman College, she was black.
More than
Like, blue black.
80% of the historical
You know.
is in ebony and ivory gold.
Well, another thing, Tuskegee Institute was all black. Wasn't no white folks in Tuskegee. You know, I mean, there was a few institutions
How about
that,
Lincoln?
huh?
Lincoln?
Lincoln had their fair white folks.
Is Bethune-Cookman University still open?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a.
It's a whole lot of, again, what y'all need to do is go look up the historically black colleges. Just look, get to see what the list is. Because a lot of them, y'all, I would say, out of all of the historical colleges, colleges that exist, none of y'all can name 10.
I couldn't.
No.
Right. Right.
Shot me all the time.
But let me take this back. You couldn't name 5.
I couldn't.
Oh, now?
And I'm saying is that, but let me just say this. But the issue is that there's many of them that we're just not familiar with, that they are historically black colleges. And what I'm saying is that, that's why I keep saying a lot of times, stop asking white people to teach your kids. Stop that. You know, we're gonna end in a minute, but what I was just getting ready to say, our biggest problem is that we do not take time to do our own legwork. We expect results, but we don't want to, we send our kids to school, we put food in their mouth, we put clothes on their back, and we expect them to be smart when they come home. That's just stupid, And then the other thing is that a lot of times when we deal with history, we have this idea of saying that, well, they didn't teach us the history, or the thing was, they always lied to us. Now, I'm pretty sure Du Bois lived way before any of y'all. And I'm pretty sure he got the same thing, that they lied to us. But it seems quite interesting that in 1915, he went and did the research and came up with evidence that was real, concrete, factual evidence. What it means is that the information was there. We just didn't make ourselves available to the information. Come on. And I'm not saying that everybody would have had access. One of the key factors for him was he was an academician. So he had access to institutions and things like that. And they knew and understood how those institutions work. Where that a lot of us might not have, but still knew that those things did happen. So when we were talking about civilizations in Africa and relationships between the Negro and Africa and the relationship between slavery and the very nature of Africa and the Negro and the white society, all of these things meant something. And then how we see black people today, so I guess, I'm gonna close down, but what I do want y'all to do is, the book is cheap. It's real cheap. This book is real cheap. And I want you to go, if you can, on your nearest black bookstore and see if they have a copy. If they don't, ask them to order a copy. If they don't, tell them you're gonna go to the enemy and get one.
How much is the book?
It's various prices under various. This one was, I think, $12 or something, or $8 or something like that. I'm not sure, but y'all can find out outlets where you can go and get the book. And what I want y'all to do is read the book. It's only 150 pages. But do me this favor. Don't read it in one sitting. I don't want you to do that. I want you to read a couple of pages, then put it down. And I'm going to read you a couple more pages and then put it down. But every time you put that thing down, every time you read a couple of pages, you should be asking yourself questions about the pages you read. You know what I'm saying? In other words, if Du Bois, he made this statement, he said, this is a statement he made in the book. He said, perhaps no race has shown in its early development a more magnificent art impulse than the Negro. And the student must not forget how far Negro genius entered into the art in the valley of the Nile, from Meroe and Napata down to the great temples of Egypt. And this is from the Negro. Now he was talking about this in 1915. The first time I ever heard the word Napata came from Doc Ben. Meroe, Doc Ben. Shakant. I'm telling you, 1980s. The earliest that they were doing research was the 50s. This is 1900. Homeboy was way ahead of his freaking self. And mind you, it wasn't like this kind of insight and information was rampant running through the black community. It just wasn't. And this is why it's our responsibility to go and do the legwork of some of those scholars like W.E.B. Debois, Lerone Hansberry, George Washington Williams, Chancellor Williams. All of these individuals, we're not talking about run-of-the-mill scholars. We're talking about jokers that's on a level that is unapproachable. When we talk about real scholarship and people that literally pioneered and laid the foundation and paved the way for other scholars to come after them. So when we think of scholars of today like Gerald Horne and Khalil, what's his name? Khalil Gibran Muhammad, or Leslie Alexander, Joy DeGruy. All of these scholars, they on the back of these people. So my thing is, it's good to know these people contemporarily, but we also wanna and need to know the people whose shoulders they stand on. So when Dr. Ben tells, if you read Dr. Clark, you'll know Hubert Harrison. It's impossible for you to read Dr. Clark and not know Hubert Harrison. It's impossible to read Dr. Clark and not know John G. Jackson or Benjamin Crowes. It's impossible for not to know, what's my man, who wrote the book, The Negro and Their Evil Roots, Richard Moore, Richard B. Moore. He wrote a book called The Negro and Its Evil Uses. That's when they used, back then, all words pertaining to black people were always, no, not evil, they were always not capitalized. So the word Negro was with a little n, and the word, black was with a little b. And what these scholars decided to do was capitalize it and make it a personal person, place, or thing. And them white folks was upset. Hubert Harrison was a theater critic and a book critic, and he would write reviews in the New York Times, and he would be eating these jokers alive, and they couldn't understand because he never went to school. I was telling you earlier how many he used to read 5 books a night, and Debois said about Harrison, he said, our academic experience and everything, he said, but I never ever heard a person know as much as he knew and never went to school. That's right. Harrison was this guy who created soapbox speaking, where you stand on a soapbox and talk to people in the street. Well, he created that in the sub-treasury in Wall Street, right under J.P. Morgan's office. There was an article that I had read, this was many years ago, 1921, from microfilm out of the Schomburg Library, about how he was so good at what he was talking about and so charismatic that this particular day, 1921, he galvanized 11,000 people on a street corner. So much so that they had to rope off the area, and J.P. Morgan was like, what the hell is going on? And when they found out there was this black guy down there talking about history and science and politics, and they just couldn't understand. He was so good at what he did that people from Columbia University, because he started soapboxing in Harlem on 134th Street in Lenox, and they would come from Columbia University and all these universities, and they would listen to him on the street corner. They would sit down on the curb. These is professors, major academicians from the academy would come and sit down on the curb to listen to this man speak. Bad man, his name is Hubert Henry Harrison. The best material done on him is by Jeff Perry, dead now, good friend of mine from many years ago. A white guy, really, 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 really black in mind. Jeff was good people, straight up, you know, but he wrote a 2-volume biography of Harrison. He wrote the Human Harrison Papers. He was the individual who organized all of the remains of all of the papers that was left of the Harrison family. And he tried to take it to the Schomburg and they wouldn't take it. Now the Schomburg wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Harrison. Because Harrison and Schomburg literally were cut buddies. They sold books on the corner, both of them. And at that time, Schomburg, as y'all do know, was Puerto Rican. And at the time, he didn't even live in Harlem, he lived in Brooklyn. Always lived in Brooklyn. And at that time, Harrison was living in San Juan Hill, you know, which is where we have, what do you call that? Lincoln Center? Lincoln Center? Well, Lincoln Center used to be San Juan Hill. Right, it was a major black community, you know. And that area set the foundation for changes that would eventually come later to what we today call Harlem. You know, Harlem literally got started by, you know, Philip and Maggie Payton. You ever get a chance? Philip and Maggie Payton. You want to know how Harlem got started? Who was the real person involved? You know, there was a lot of places we lived, the Tenderloin, you know, Little Africa. Did y'all ever, I told y'all about Little Africa, right?
Yeah.
Right, where's Little Africa at?
Port Authority?
No. Think of what I tell you.
Seneca
No,
Village?
no, Seneca Village, no. I told you Little Africa today has been renamed Little Italy.
Are you kidding?
The area that you call Little Italy originally was Little Africa. And that area went from Greenwich Village all the way down to Canal Street. That area was the first place Africans, you know, had to, and remember, Africans always maintained their existence close to coastal areas. Remember that. Wherever you see people that are mixed, it's in the coastal area. You don't see mixed people interior. Very seldom. Any place you see, any areas where there's waterways, that's why there's so many people, so many mixed people in Louisiana. Because of the Mississippi. Creole. Don't y'all know where the word red bone comes from? Y'all never heard of red bones?
Yeah.
Y'all know, do y'all know what a red bone is? Stop it. No, stop. I'm not talking about that. I want y'all, write this down. I want y'all to go look up red bones. I'm not, listen. I want y'all to look up, listen to me. I want y'all to look up the red bones of Louisiana.
Spell it.
R-E-D-B-O-N-E, red bone. And we're not just talking about light skin, I'm talking about a real group of people called red bones. Y'all will check that out later, but thank you everybody. I appreciate y'all's support for this evening. I want to thank Brother Ray Ray and the William Mackey History Club for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. I hope I was able to, you know, give you some information that you can work with and that will help you do the things that you need to do, and push come to shove that you will take into consideration some of these basic techniques and some of these particular insights and use them for your own benefit in your own personal research and study, and, you know, making sure that we become our own custodians and our own historians of our own communities.
Anybody got a quick question for Trust? Anybody got a quick question? Zoom audience, a quick question for Trust?
Yeah, I have a quick
Yo,
question.
thank you, Brother Trust. Thank you, Ray Ray.
Okay, thank you.
We before we come with the question, oh, go ahead.
That my question is when it came down to Africa and Pan-African. When do they
say that again?
Chronologically.
Say it.
Africa and Pan-Africa.
You said Africa and what?
Africa and Pan-African.
You said you wanted to know what about Africa?
No, what dates for Pan-African?
Oh, what dates?
Pan-Africanism.
Well, you saying what dates for Pan-Africanism?
In the States, Pan-Africanism.
Pan-Africanism had its beginning around 1900. The last Pan-African Conference was in, I think, 2017, either 2017 or 2013, something like that. All you have to do, you can Google, if you want to, you can Google Pan-African conferences, and they'll start with H. Sylvester Williams' first conference in Manchester, England in 1900, all the way up until the 1945. That's the last one that was done, the 5th Pan-African Congress with Debois. And then after that, you had, I think, 4 other ones, you know, all the way up until the 2000s. So, 94, I think it was one, you know. But you can find it all, the dates and the material are all on the internet that you can get.
Okay.
Anybody else? Any other questions?
Anybody else?
Yes.
Thank you, Brother Trust.
I appreciate that.
She coming with
This
a question.
question has to do with what you were saying about genetics, and if it means 13%,
Yes, ma'am.
there's a 13% chance of,
Of those having a common ancestor.
yeah. So
Yes.
I want to know, does a brother and sister always come out with the same percentages?
No, of course not.
They don't.
I just told you that you have a mother and a father.
Yeah.
Everybody in your family is going to have a different DNA makeup.
Okay.
Your brother and your sister don't have the same DNA makeup you. There's evidence that they are your brother and sister in that DNA. And there's evidence in their DNA that their father and mother is your father and mother.
Right.
That's in there.
Right.
But the same DNA, no. No, not even in percentage. It's going to be different.
What?
The reason it's going to be different is because it's always based on the nature of how the genetics unfolds. Remember, we thinking that genetics is something that, you know, is cut and dry, proportionally equal, and no, it's just not. That's not how it works. You know, and the problem is that we think that, you know, to make all these variations of humans that we have is some really, you know, light thing. You know, like for instance, for a white person to be white, you know. And then we have this idea that, you know, we looking at people based on their physical function to determine their quality. You know what I'm saying? It's like saying that men and women equal because of their minds, or men and women equal because they physically are the same strength.
No.
Right.
Yeah, I see.
Right. But so when we say that a woman's mentality is just as good as a man's mentality, case closed. The issue is that when we look at biological differences, that's something different in retrospect. But that's how society looks at how we just identify the woman versus a man. In society, a woman is looked at as a weaker man. That's how they looked at it. That's why she's called a wounded man. Wound man. Yes, sir. Say that again?
Twins.
Not in all cases. Sometimes.
One cell split into two. Identical twins?
Well, it depends. Again, that's why they use the word identical. They have a variety of different kinds of twins. You know, paternal, maternal, whatever. But and again, it always determines on how that gene developed, or how that egg developed inside those particular individuals. In other words, whether, as you said, whether it was one egg that split, or whether it was 2 eggs in one. You know what I'm saying? Or not 2 eggs, but 2 sperm in one, in this case. But you wanna do your own research and check it out. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Remember the magazine, Jet magazine?
Yes, definitely. Got some at home right now.
They have a picture in Jet magazine of white couple having 2 black babies.
I got one. Actually, it's in not Jet. The one that I have is in National Geographic. Yeah. But next time I come, I'll bring it. I'll show you that it was the father was black, the mother was white, and they had twin daughters, and one was white and the one was black.
Yeah.
But it just shows you that, you know, you can't determine genetics. You can't determine what life is going to happen, how life is going to happen. Remember, when the sperm hits that egg, 300 million sperm get a shot. Only one get in. Think about that.
So the 2 white couple that had the black child, it's like a throwback.
Well, the issue is that it has a lot to do with, again, in their family. In science, they have throwbacks, but they're generational. That means that it'll skip a generation, then come out in the next generation. So you could have 2 white people, but they won't actually have a black baby. That means somebody black was already there.
Exactly.
And I hope the father or the alpha male, that's the couple, I hope he don't say, well, hey.
Yeah, but again, we just making speculations, because I mean, there's no way you're gonna predict science. I mean, predict biology, because it's just gonna do what it's gonna do. You know, we have this idea that we can predict things. So we say that in a day there's 24 hours. Everybody know about that? No, it's not 24 hours. It's 23 hours, 46 minutes, and 56 seconds.
Yes.
Now, the problem is that we round it off, and when you round it off, you will end up wrong. That means that eventually you will be wrong, outside the calendar. Now, the problem with that is that that's what we do with everything. We know a certain amount, and we take it and we round it off as if though it means that for everything. So you got people running around saying that I'm melanated. Like, what are you, stupid? Everything is melanated. Yeah, everybody got melanin. The only person that don't is an albino. That means that he that has a deficiency in his makeup that doesn't give him the ability to create pigmentation. That pigmentation is the essence that protects him from ultraviolet sun rays, or depending on what environment he might live in. You know, because pigmentation don't have no effect if you live in the cold. Right, so if anybody here in this room was in cold weather, the darker you are, the more problematic it would be. That's just facts, you know. And the issue is that when you're closer to the equator, it's just same thing. The lighter you are is a problem. So that's why it ain't by chance that when you by the equator, you don't see animals that are all white. You won't see that. You ain't gonna see a polar bear in the equator. That shit ain't gonna ever happen. You ain't gonna see a white snowshoe rabbit in not. Right. When you see items like that in those environments, they call them unicorns, or they call them albino. And they do that because they know that normally that environment wouldn't produce something like that. So if you produce an all-white tiger or an all-white gorilla, this is an anomaly, you know. And that's, you know, how these things function. But
And Charles, going back to Neanderthal, what she asked about, and you said something about Germany. Is that was the first fossils?
yeah, the word Neanderthal.
So that's why they got the...
Yeah, the word they got, the name came from the Neander Valley. The Neander Valley is in Germany. The earliest archaeologists that did research did it in that area. When they found the bones, that's what they thought. They thought that human beings had their origin in Europe. That's what they thought. Until they began to do other research, and they began to find out that other places in the world had human remains that was thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s of years older than that.
So that's the early Europeans.
No, we talk about Neanderthal.
But her question was, how did these
The Homo sapiens got there afterwards. Remember, Africans left Africa and then they went and populated the world.
So that's what Caucasians, we have
The Caucasians that y'all see today are from the second population, not from Neanderthals. The amount of Neanderthal genes are in modern day Caucasians is about maybe 1–2%. If I said that 2% of anything is a lot in something that's 100%, you would say no. 2% is nothing.
All right, mention your book.
Yes, go.
Oh, not mine.
All right, mention that book, eh?
This was the
Come over here. You talk about the book. You want to say something?
Okay. Brother Raymond Winbush, PhD.
Yeah,
He
from
was the
Chicago.
speaker, at CMOTAP, Committee to Eliminate Media Offenses to African People. And this book on the warrior method to raising black boys, I wish every parent with a male black child has it. I mean, in depth.
Can you get it on
As a
Amazon?
social, I brought it from him directly. He brought the books, but
What's the name
I'm
of the
sure.
Well, he got some website
Warrior,
material on it,
yes.
I'm pretty sure.
And he has a
What
website
is the
too, I'm
name?
sure. The warrior method.
Warrior method.
Yes,
The
it's
author's name?
excellent. I wish I had this as an instruction guide when my children were.
Okay, we understand that. Who wrote the book?
Mr. Raymond Winbush. The second thing I was gonna mention was,
Warrior method.
yes, they have the, I'm gonna use it for the grandchildren, that's for sure. Oh my God.
Make it quick, man.
Okay. What is a crime against humanity? Why must it be repaired? Mark your calendars for August 29th. A crime does not rot. 25 years ago, a systematic shift in international justice took place in the Durban, South Africa at the United Nations World Conference Against Racism. For the first time in history, the barbaric, exploitive, and racist European transatlantic slave trade and slavery were boldly and precisely identified
That's
as...
the lecture we're at.
They're going to have a gathering on the 29th of August
Location.
at Fulton and Utica, Fulton Park, across from Boys and Girls High School.
Okay, good. We'll shoot it
So
in
put it
the
on your
email.
calendar.
And we got the New York Kuzman Temple presents meditation this Sunday, August. That's going to be at 1653 Bedford Avenue. And it's a meditation class. All are welcome. It starts at 11. Bring a pair of white socks. Location 1653. And it's a meditation presentation. All are welcome.
No stinky feet.
No stinky feet, as Truss said. Next,
Mega evidence.
give Truss a great big hand.
Yes.
We're gonna clean up real quick. Truss's next lecture is gonna be on the making of human mankind. And he's gonna come up and go through the making of human beings. That's going to be his next lecture. We haven't set a date yet. Dr. Lewis will be the next speaker in 2 weeks.
And it's from 2 to 5 p.m. It's going to be taking place throughout the United States. Denver, if you have family there, Houston, Atlanta, Kansas City, St. Louis, Greenville, South Carolina, Detroit, New York, New Jersey, Washington, D.C., DMV, which is Delaware, Maryland and Virginia, Chicago, Boston. They're all going to do this, but New York City is going to have it at Fulton Park between 2 and 5 p.m.
And give Truss a great big hand. We're going to break it down. You can talk. We're going to cut the camera off. Now we got two people. One is 9:15.